We love a retro title here at LT Gaming, and honestly, I'm just going to take any excuse for a wander down memory lane at this point. Just take a look at my recent Forgotten RTS video for what I mean here. And it's not just for nostalgia's sake either, it's gaming history to me. All that stuff that quietly shaped our tastes, our patience, and our tolerance for slightly unhinged inventory screens. And today we're talking Forgotten RPGs, and RPGs is one of my favourite genres that I probably don't feature enough on the channel. So if you do enjoy this one, give it a like and let me know, because I'll happily make this a reoccurring theme. Welcome to LT Gaming, my name is Tom, and look, RPGs are basically part of my DNA. I still drop occasionally John Arenicus lines at social events, and I get absolutely zero recognition. It's kind of tragic really. But this list is curated from my own experiences, obviously, what I grew up with, what stuck with me, and what still holds up today. But I really want to hear your picks as well, so chuck your forgotten favourites in the comments, because yes, I'm going to go out and play them all. Right, let's get into this one. The Age of Decadence is a turn-based isometric CRPG, and is set in this low magic post-apocalyptic world that feels like the Roman Empire has collapsed or something, and everyone's just been sharpening their knives ever since. And you're not doing the chosen one fantasy here, you're just trying to survive politics, factions, and bad decisions with whatever build you've committed to. What made this one great is the tone. It's brilliantly dry, consistent writing, and characters who actually behave like thinking adults instead of just quest dispensers. And it is a proper roleplay first style game where you can genuinely build different types of characters, so talky characters feel as valid as your combat monsters. It was forgotten because it's pretty uncompromising. It launched as a niche indie CRPG, and it really punishes sloppy builds and naive heroics, and it's not really mass market behaviour you want to see in a game. Today it's very playable on Steam if you can tolerate a bit of jank, and it's still a very distinctive world. The Shining Force series, and I'm going to focus on Shining Force 2 here because that's the one I played, is proper comfort food tactical RPG and one of the foundational blocks from the Mega Drive era. This is turn-based battles on a grid, but it has a surprisingly adventurous vibe to it, so go off and wander on the overworld in between. You build up your little squad of oddballs, you kit them out and you level them, all the classic tropes. For me, this is iconic in a most personal way. It's one Luke and I played a lot as kids. We'd rent it from the local video shop back in the day when that was a thing, and we had zero idea what we were doing, and we still played it to death. Then we'd return it, rent it again, and just rinse and repeat. Now why do I think it's forgotten? Partly timing and platform. It's a Genesis Mega Drive classic, but I think a lot of tactical RPG nostalgia talk ends up clustered elsewhere, and this one gets filed under the old Sega thing, rather than a genre cornerstone like it deserves. I have absolutely zero idea where you can pick this one up and play it, so if you do know, drop it in the comments, and I'll definitely be playing it. Black Geyser, Couriers of Darkness is a modern isometric CRPG that's deliberately chasing that old Infinity Engine feeling. It reminds me a lot of Icewind Dale. Party-based adventuring, piles of quests, loads of dialogue and choices, and enough loot to keep your brain happy. Now fair warning, the opening is a bit of a slog. It's basically like a tutorial for dummies, and it definitely puts players off initially. But it doesn't try to reinvent the genre, it is traditional CRPG done with care. Now it's probably forgotten because it's more on the good side than great, to be perfectly frank, and in this modern space that can only get you so far. But if you're looking for something that feels like a true Infinity Engine successor, and you've already rinsed through the obvious classics, this is a solid overlooked pick. Sacred is a proper old school action RPG with this classic Diablo era thing, but doing it in its own way. Pick a class, head out into the big open world, hoover up different loot, and slowly turn your character into a walking behemoth. The core loop is very simple: fight, level, gear up, repeat. But it stretches across a surprisingly large world with a lot of content. What I really enjoyed with this game is how much depth it has once you start to understand it. Your builds take time to click and skills aren't instantly obvious, and the game does not hold your hand. It's forgotten mostly because of the first couple hours a bit frustrating, I find. It explains itself pretty poorly compared to modern ARPGs, and controls and presentation do feel clunky. But Sacred really shines with this feeling of crafting a build over dozens of hours and watching it come to fruition. So if you are an ARPG fan who doesn't mind older design choices, this is still rewarding and worth your time. Shadows Awakening is an ARPG that wears its influences proudly, so think very Diablo again in script, but in the best way possible. So you roll into a hub, pick up a bunch of quests, head out into the danger zones, smash a few monsters for loot, and break every crate and barrel you can find. The core campaign is pretty tidy, around 15 hours for the main line, and about 30 if you're going to do all the side stuff along the way. What's great on this one is the structure, replayability on top of the ARPG loop. Different characters and missions open up, new dialogue and different paths, so there's not just one linear loot run that you follow. Controls are intuitive and there's some fun puzzle moments along the way. Why is this one forgotten? Because the isometric ARPG space is absolutely stacked with content. And if you're not a headline giant, you get lost in the noise. Some people also bounce off the isometric viewpoint on principle, which is fair enough even if they're completely and obviously wrong. If you want a shorter, more curated ARPG with a solid atmosphere, some solid voice work and environments along the way, Shadows Awakening is an overlooked gem for me. Might and Magic 6 The Mandate of Heaven is a classic first-person, party-based CRPG where fantasy is basically roam a big open world, steadily get stronger until you casually are deleting things that used to one-shot you. It is exploration-led, very build and loot-driven, and it's got this old school rhythm where every new spell, skill rank and bit of gear feels like a proper power spike. Now this is more Luke's pick than mine. He played this series a lot, whereas I was more on the Heroes of Might and Magic side of things. But I totally get why he loves it. It's the kind of RPG where you're always poking around the world and seeing what you can handle, then coming back a bit later with some better tools and a slightly more inflated sense of competence. Now I think it's on the forgotten side because it's mostly exposure. It sits in this awkward zone where it's beloved by the people who grew up with it, but it doesn't get talked about in the same breath as the modern RPG renaissance that's happened. And if you're not in the mood for that old school vibe, you can just bounce off of the UI. But if you're up for a retro dungeon crawl vibe with loads of exploration and tangible progress, it's still going to hit hard. Betrayal at Krondor is one of those old school RPGs that feels like it's pulling you into the novel. And it doesn't just point you at quests, it's a party-based adventure set in Raymond E. Feist's Makemia world, with a proper emphasis on narrative, character moments, and a sense of travelling through a dangerous world where you never really have full control. For me, this one was basically crack. I'm a huge Feist fan, and getting to live in that setting rather than just read about it felt ridiculously special at the time. The game has this constant tension baked in. You're exploring, managing your resources, picking your way through the world, and you always feel like you're one bad encounter away from disaster. And I mean that literally. I remember this game being ridiculously hard. Maybe I was just too young, but I'd wander for hours, and I'd feel like a grand adventurer, and then I'd get absolutely wrecked by some random goblin or dark elf who decided just to wipe me out. And the harshness of it was part of why it stuck with me. Every fight mattered and progress felt very earned, and it creates a mood that a lot of RPGs struggle to match. I think it's forgotten because it's older, it's niche, it sits in this awkward space where it's legendary to people who played it, but it's rarely mentioned outside of classic CRPG circles. Today you can grab it as the Betrayal collection on Steam. If you can handle the age and difficulty, you're in for a piece of RPG history. Arx Fatalis is a first-person RPG set in this genuinely weird little premise. The sun is gone, civilization has moved underground, and you have to scrape your way through this claustrophobic fantasy world of caves, forts, and forgotten ruins. Moment to moment, it's classic immersive RPG stuff. Poke around for supplies, fiddle with locks and traps, and get into really messy fights. And you survive by being genuinely curious, and occasionally a little bit sneaky and underhanded. It's great because it feels hands-on. The game loves physical interactions and layered mechanics, crafting, faffing around in your inventory, environmental problem solving. But the real headline was the magic system. You literally draw runes in the air with your mouse to cast spells, which sounds gimmicky until you realise it makes it feel like you're actually doing wizardry, not just pressing your fireball button on cooldown. It's forgotten because honestly it's old school but in the prickliest way possible. Story and dialogue are a bit blunt, and it's got that early 2000s stiffness, but it has theme and atmosphere in absolute spades. To play it today, there is a modernised version called Arx Libertatis, which modernises the engine and fixes a lot of the rough edges. I haven't found the time to play it yet, but it's definitely on my list. Alpha Protocol is basically the answer to the question, what if a spy thriller was a proper RPG? You play as this agent bouncing between missions where your choices, alliances and the way you handle conversations genuinely reshape how the story plays out. The core loop is talk your way in, shoot your way out, or vice versa, level up your skills and then live with the consequences. What makes this one great even now is the dialogue and reactivity. The game gives you different conversation stances and actually commits to them, so you can roleplay as this slick professional or this aggressively chaotic nut job, and the game doesn't slap you on the wrist for not being perfect stealth. It's a cult classic precisely because it lets you be that messy spy and feels like the story is adapting to your choices. It's forgotten because it launched to polarized reviews, and the moment-to-moment gameplay had this 2010s jank. So think ambitious ideas but rough execution. It straight up disappeared for a while because of expired music licenses, which didn't mean it stayed really in the conversation. But if you can forgive a bit of clunk, you'll get one of the most interesting choices for spy RPGs ever made. Arcanum of Steamworks and Magick Obscura is a bloody brilliant name, and somehow the game underneath it is just as ambitious. It's a classic isometric CRPG set in a world mid-industrial revolution, so you get Victorian cities, factories, railways, and right next door ancient magic and fantasy races. What made this one brilliant was the build freedom, and the way your setting actually supports it. You can be a gunslinger, a necromancer, a smooth talking con artist, or build yourself into a ridiculous steam-powered mechanical contraption. And the signature system was magic versus technology incompatibility. The more you lent on tech, the more the magic around you misbehaves, and vice versa. If you go on the magic side, the tech starts to fall and fail in your vicinity. So it wasn't just flavour, it changed how you move through the towns, what gear makes sense, and how you would approach problems. Now it's forgotten because it's a classic if you can get this working CRPG. It's not shy about difficulty either. You can get absolutely pasted by an early random encounter, and combine that with an incredibly unforgiving no autosaves capacity, and you can find yourself losing 5 hours of playtime if you get complacent. But if you're up for some jank in exchange for one of the most distinctive RPG worlds ever made, it's an absolute must play. Jade Empire is BioWare doing a martial arts fantasy RPG set in a world inspired by Chinese myth rather than the usual castles and dungeons routine. You travel between towns and temples, picking sides, building relations, and switching between different combat styles. I came across this one in a weird way. I played it after Baldur's Gate 2, and for some reason my brain decided it secretly might be Baldur's Gate 3, which was a complete nonsense of course, but that was my headspace at the time. But it's not that, it's smaller, it's more focused, and it's a very different sort of RPG. What I found instead was this unique world that genuinely stuck with me long after the credits have rolled. The setting has a warmth and real identity to it, the spirit, politics, the humour, and it's got that old school BioWare strength of making your companions feel real and not just stat blocks wearing some different gear. The choices aren't as sprawling as a giant CRPG, but they are very human choices, and the game's tone does a lot of the heavy lifting. It's forgotten because it sits in this weird gap. It's not as famous as BioWare's big heavy hitters, but I do think it deserves a bit more love. Today it's a little dated in the combat, but if you want an RPG setting that feels different in tone and play, it's absolutely worth a look. Anachronox is a 2001 sci-fi RPG built on the old Quake 2 engine, and it's got this wonderfully oddball noirish setup, where you're this washed up private investigator, Sly Boots, phenomenal name by the way, and you take on cases in this grimy space slum, and somehow you stumble into this galaxy spanning mystery. It plays like a party RPG with exploration, turn-based scraps, and constant chatting to absolutely everyone. Now it's great because it has this world texture to it. The universe feels dense and lived in, and it leans into humour in a way that most RPGs are too scared to commit to. And it's one of those games where the joy is just wandering, exhausting NPC dialogue, and finding these odd little side bits to pursue. It's forgotten because of timing and circumstances. It launched into a really messy era, a studio that was on its way out, and it never really got the runway it deserved. On top of that, it does end in this kind of cliffhangery way that left you wanting more, and a follow-up just never happened. Today it's decent, you can play it on Steam Deck, and a lot of people happily run it that way. If you've got a yearning for some nostalgia with that Quake Unreal era presentation style, it's a proper little time capsule worth cracking into. Ultima Underworld is one of those, oh, this is where it all came from RPGs. It's first person, real-time dungeon crawling with a huge emphasis on being in the space, not just fighting in it. You're trapped in this living dungeon and the game is constantly nudging you to explore, listen, improvise and survive by whatever means possible. What made these great and so special is the design philosophy behind them. The world isn't just scenery, it's a system. You're given tools and the game genuinely expects you to find your own solutions, not just follow one intended path. Now the phrase is overused, but it really is immersive choice-led problem solving, and it's exactly the lineage that you feel in games later like Deus Ex, and the same mind is behind that game as well. Now it's forgotten because of age and friction. The controls and presentation are proper early 90s and many people bounce off that, and that means you never get to the good stuff. Which is a shame because the ideas are still ahead of plenty of modern games. Now, I don't know how to play it today, I haven't tried the GOG version, but I'm desperately looking for the best way to do so let me know in the comments. Tyranny is an isometric CRPG where the central twist is pretty grim. You're not the hero arriving to save the realm, you're effectively working for the winning side. You play as a Fatebinder, this sort of judge, enforcer, and you're travelling in the newly conquered land settling disputes, which mostly means deciding who gets crushed, who gets spared, and what order should look like. Now, I think this game has fantastic writing. It's one of those RPGs that genuinely feels like a big political fantasy novel. So there is a lot of reading, a lot of faction texture, and the world really responds to your choices in a tangible way than just feeling cosmetic. You're constantly shaping relationships between your regions and groups, and the game leans into that. It's forgotten because I don't really know. It's text heavy, which maybe mean people bounced off it who wanted more action forward pacing, and it got a bit boxed in by the broader CRPG conversation dominated by bigger and shinier names. But I think today it's still excellent. You have to meet it on its terms. Combat is real time with pulls, which I actually love. It's not the sort of thing you half watch though while clicking abilities like an MMO. You're meant to pause, check, look at your positioning, the AI behavior, issue new orders, and then unpause and then try to do it all again. If you enjoy that rhythm though, I think this is a very much overlooked gem that people should play. The Temple of Elemental Evil is a classic party-based CRPG, and it's basically the answer to what if a D&D 3.5 combat encounter was the entire point of a game. You build a party, you creep through dangerous dungeons, and you spend most of your time in turn-based fights, doing all the good stuff that you like from D&D. It's great at tactical depth, the story is lean and presentation is definitely showing its age, don't get me wrong, but it genuinely feels like a tabletop session. Strict rules, occasional frustration when the dice hate you, and then that immense satisfaction when a plan comes together and you win because you played it the right way. Now it's forgotten because it's not the most welcoming CRPG. It's focused, it's crunchy, and it arrived in an era when a lot of players wanted RPGs to be smoother and more cinematic. If you're a D&D purist and you love that Pathfinder style of build a party, win by tactics, this is absolutely worth a look for you. Drakensang the Dark Eye is a party-based CRPG built around a low medieval fantasy vibe. So castles, ruins, forests, caves, that sort of grounded setting that doesn't really shout epic to you every 5 minutes, but it still pulls you in because it feels like a very real place. I think the overall package here is great. The environments are genuinely lovely for the era. The soundtrack does a lot of heavy lifting both in ambience and in battle, and there's a proper spread of monsters and progression to keep the loop satisfying. The main quest is fine, but I think it really shines with these side quests and content. They chain up and they feel like they could be a main plot in most other games. It's forgotten because it is an underrated classic. It never became a mainstream shorthand, and it carries this old RPG baggage, stability issues, crashes. But if you can get by that and you're a fan of this genre who enjoys party management and slow burn immersion, it's going to be absolutely worth the effort. Wizardry 8 is a sort of old school party RPG that feels like it's daring to commit to something. You build a team, you wander in this chunky fantasy world full of dangerous encounters, and the core loops that you would expect are there. Now, I gotta be honest, I have no idea how the other 7 Wizardry games are, because this is the one I played, and it's bloody fantastic. For me, it belongs in the conversation with games like Morrowind. It scratches that same itch for progression and discovery. Builds matter, composition matters, and there's a real sense of we're on an expedition and the world might actually kill us. It's forgotten because it's niche, it's unapologetically old school, and it never had the mainstream cultural footprint of the big names. And I just don't hear people name dropping it ever. Now, if you missed the era where systems had some real punch to them, this is one of the juiciest lose hours on end RPGs that you can still pick up and play. Give it a little bit of patience at the start and then you'll thank me later. UnderRail is a single character isometric CRPG that feels more like a refined systems heavier cousin of Fallout 1 and 2 if you recall them, but we swap out the wasteland for a brutal underground of stations, tunnels, factions and things that absolutely want to see you dead. And you don't run a party, you're building one person into a specialist, and the game really lives and dies on how well you understand your own build. It's great because of the depth and there's a lot of replayability here. Combat puts a big emphasis on gear choices, positioning and mobility. Once your character really starts to come online mid-game, it is incredibly satisfying. For me, in games like this, half the fun is planning how I'm going to build my character, investing 10-20 hours in getting that character up and running, and then deciding I want to do something completely different. Now this is a forgotten gem because it is niche and uncompromising. It doesn't do flashy cinematics or mainstream friendliness. It is a deep CRPG that expects you to engage with systems and will punish you if you don't. How does it hold up though? It's still brilliant, but go in with the right mindset. The early hours are like an extended tutorial. It takes you like 6-7 hours to just get into the game, I feel. But once you're in for a hell of a ride. Nox is one of my all-time favourites. An action RPG from 2000 where you pick a class, dive into a fantasy world and you just get on with it. Exploring, scrapping, getting your loot, steadily turning yourself into a problem. It's snappy, punchy, and it's got that classic Westwood confidence where everything feels designed to keep you moving. For me, the real memory is multiplayer. Luke and I sunk a ridiculous number of hours into this, not just a single player campaign. They had this really cool mode called Nox Quest, and if you were there, you know it was chaotic, it was brilliant, and it was the sort of game you'd hop on for half an hour and then 3-4 hours later you're still playing. Why it's great: vibe, sound, personality, the music and effects are insanely memorable. When you remember it's Westwood Studios with Frank Lapacki on soundtrack duties, you know why it hits so hard. Do what dee do! Yes, exactly, I've summoned a stone golem to crush an urchin and I feel really great about it. Why it's forgotten today is mostly because time moved on and the online scene did too. The official Westwood online servers are long gone and multiplayer is now basically living off of the community's set up patches. But honestly, don't worry about all that. It's worth playing the single player game for itself, for that nostalgic rollercoaster back when Westwood were absolute titans. Planescape Torment is the deep, moody brother of the classic Infinity Engine era, sitting right alongside games like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale, but aiming for something far stranger. You wake up as the nameless one in the city of Sigil, and the game is less about loot and spectacle and more about identity and memory. And it's sort of like playing through a philosophical manuscript, and most RPGs would never even dream of attempting this. Moment to moment you're exploring, talking, reading, making choices and realizing the world has an absurd amount of lore and creativity packed into it. If I'd say one reason it's great, it's the writing. And I don't mean it's good for its time, it was genuinely creative, imaginative and weirdly funny when it wants to be. It didn't take itself too seriously, which gives it this odd charm, even when it drags you into quite heavy themes. It gives you a lot of freedom. You can be good, you can be atrociously awful, you can kill NPCs, but definitely save first, and consequences are absolutely going to follow. It's proper role playing. It's forgotten because it wasn't for everyone. It was a 90s game and it does show today. Simpler HUD, less visual flash, and a pace that assumes you actually want to read and think rather than chase dopamine fixes. It's still a classic though, and the enhanced edition makes it easier to run and revisit. Just do yourself a favour, save often, especially if you're the sort of person who likes to accidentally misclick, let's say, and murder a few people. Not that I ever done that, of course, but yeah, absolute classic, no brainer, go play this game. Alright, that will do it guys, hope you enjoyed the video, drop your comments with some picks, drop your comments what you think about my picks, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye now.